I will go ahead and start. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining our second week of summer series webinars. My name is Jennifer Connard. Some of you I know that are on the call, welcome. So I lead the strategic support service team at US Analytics. I have been with US Analytics for almost 10 years, but I have a lengthy time in Oracle EPM or Oracle Hyperion before it was even Oracle. So anyway, have a long background, long history of being an administrator, supporting clients and doing some light development over the years. And so on the call with me, I have Melinda McHugh. She will introduce herself in just a second. And then Don Seitz is one of the key leaders in our support team. So he may chime in from time to time on the slides that we cover. So Melinda, I'll ask you if you don't mind just giving a quick intro before I get started.
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Melinda McHugh, and I've been with US Analytics about, I think, 6 years now. Prior to that, I was consulting for about, I think, 4 or 5 years, and prior to that, I was in FP&A and/or accounting group. So I've used these products going on close to 20 years now, primarily in the planning side of the house. So as that has grown into EPM, I've used it as an end user, an administrator, and a consultant. And I've been the support planning lead for US Analytics for like the last 2 years.
Awesome. Thanks, Melinda. And Don, do you want to say hi real quick? I know Don is not a presenter, but he may chime in from time to time.
Right. Hi, everybody. I'm Don Seitz. I've been at US Analytics for over 2 years now, but my background is mostly in closing consolidations and in corporate accounting and IT world. So my cliche is no one person can really know all things EPM. So it's good that Jennifer and Melinda are the fairy godmothers here. So that's fine.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, thanks, Don. Yeah, and I didn't want to make this kind of like one-sided, so it could really just be your fairy god person that comes in to help save the day as need be. So I will go ahead and get started. And then just one quick plug about US Analytics. As most of you know, if some of you are clients of ours, or if you're not a client of ours today, US Analytics has been in the Oracle EPM space for over 20 years. We historically have been project centric, meaning we come in, build a project, maybe build your consolidation system or your planning system, or even infrastructure for those that may be on premise right now. So basically over the last 7 to 10 years, the duration that Melinda and I have been with US Analytics, we started heavier into support. So we do lead the industry in supporting the Oracle EPM. We do still do projects on occasion when those come up. And also as we're supporting our clients, if we do find areas of improvement or enhancements or whatnot, we may do projects on the side. So anyway, just wanted to give that little update about US Analytics. So now let's talk about what you guys are really here for, and that is about the, hold on, the presentation. There we go. So hold on. All right. Okay, so I am going to start with a couple of riddles. So in our support team, every morning we have a daily huddle. So we meet for 15 minutes to talk about the day's activities or any issues that folks need troubleshooting. But one of the most fun things about our team and what we do is we share riddles every day. And so I thought this would be perfect for us to talk about ocean riddles as we kick off. So, and then also just to give folks some time to join if they're running late. So why are some fish at the bottom of the ocean?
They eat too much?
They eat too much? No. Why are some fish at the bottom of the ocean? Because they dropped out of school.
Oh, ha, ha, ha.
All right. And then the second one is, what kind of rocks are never found in the ocean? So if anybody has a young kids, these are also good jokes for your kids. What kinds of rocks are never found in the ocean?
Moon rocks?
Ta-da! The dry ones. Dry rocks are never found in the ocean. So, okay, yeah, thanks for playing our little quick corny game. So anyway, talking about administrator tasks of the Oracle EPM solution. So I will lean a little bit heavy on the cloud solutions, but definitely this pertains to on-premise environments. And our current support portfolio at US Analytics is about half and half. We have half of our clients that are on-premise having HFM or planning or S-based applications, and the other half of our support clients are on Oracle EPM. So either with PBCS, NetSuite PBCS, or NSPB, and then some on consolidation. We do have a couple of clients that have the full platform. So we actually support their EDMCS, ARCs, FCCS, and EPBCS, the whole gamut. So In our strategic managed support team, we try to not only enhance your experience, but we try to take care of some administrator tasks so that you can get to the beach or handle other important things. And here's, basically how we do those things. And so we have about 8 or 9 categories of topics. I'll talk about them. We'll kind of just go over some things to watch out for if you're not doing these things. We can also give you advice, and Melinda and I will tag team on these different areas. So when it comes to substitution variables or subvars, one of the things that we notice is the timing of the subvar change. Like, when is it done and is it widely communicated? And by that, I mean, if there are different work streams. So let's say you have an accounting team that also pulls data from your app, as well as a planning team that uses it to forecast or whatnot. Does everyone know on both of those teams, do they all know that the subvar is getting changed? And this is really important because you may be advancing the variable for the next month to do, whatever activity. And if the substitution variable is used in, let's say, a report or in data management and a data load, and someone's not expecting it, if the change of the subvar is not widely communicated and everyone knows, then there may be some, questions on, oh, my data's not right. And we always hate to get that question or get that comment, because I would say, in my experience in years of working with Oracle Hyperion, the problem is not ever the solution. Well, I won't say not ever. Occasionally it may be the solution, but a lot of times it's the process, and maybe the process wasn't communicated and someone doesn't know that the substitution variables were advanced, or they may not realize the variable is used in a report and they go to run the report thinking it's a certain period and it is actually running for a different period. So, we just want to recommend that everyone knows when the substitution variables change, or maybe use a calendar like a FP&A or accounting closed calendar that everyone knows on the night of day, work day -1, everyone knows the substitution variables change and these variables change. So make sure it's widely communicated. And then if you don't have a repository, this can be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet or, in some collaboration tool that you may use. Is there a repository that identifies all the objects that are impacted by the substitution variable? And I mentioned a few of those. And kind of what I'm talking about is, are your reports, are they set to use substitution variables? Are your load rules set to use variables? Maybe you have certain calculations or rule sets or business rules or whatever. One thing that we like to do when we come in and support, one of our initial things that we do during onboarding is get a list of all the substitution variables. And if the list isn't there, we will create the list to say, okay, this variable is used in these 3 reports, these calculations, these data forms, and maybe these data load rules. So anyway, it's just some good advice on keeping that repository so you don't feel like you're not sure if someone comes with a question to you and says this report isn't working. That's the first place we'd look, right? Is to check out the substitution variables. So, all right, then the next administrator task would be around change control. And change control usually is kind of a scary IT term, but really what we mean when it comes to the Oracle EPM environment is, are there changes that are tested and verified so that no adverse impacts would occur, like losing data? And so if you have a tight change control process, if you are making changes to, let's say, your account hierarchy, maybe you're adding a new account, or maybe you're adding a new cost center or department. And Melinda has a good example of this, but if there's normal, like just real customary changes that probably don't have a big impact, it's probably okay to make those changes in prod. Although I would probably suggest and recommend that you have a tried and true process of doing everything in test first. So making your changes, testing to make sure there's going to be no negative impact, make sure your data loads happen and that you're not missing any mappings you may have forgotten to add, making sure that any reports that run, and that's another thing we didn't talk about, but when you are building reports, you want to make sure they're dynamic. So maybe they choose all descendants of a parent. That way, when you add a new account, it is automatically in your report. That's a best practice of building out reports. But as I'm talking about change control, what I'm really meaning is just make sure that your changes are tested and vetted so that you don't have any adverse impacts. And then also, is there a maintenance window in an established process when you do make changes? So maybe you do them only in the 3rd week of the month, or maybe you only do them on workday -7 through workday -1. Maybe there's that maintenance window so that everybody knows They might be locked out if they're trying to do a retrieve in the application. It's because maybe you've put it in administrator mode to make those updates. So anyway, just make sure that's communicated. So I did want to mention around change control and making metadata changes. When you know the mechanics of doing them, they seem pretty easy. You can either do them obviously over the web in Dimension, or you can use like the Dimension editor tool. And I know Melinda actually came to the rescue with one of our clients recently that they didn't really understand the adverse impact of renaming. I think it was an alias. Melinda, I'll let you chime in on what exactly it was, but they actually did lose data.
Yeah, what happened is the employee was trying to just what she was thinking, oh, I'm just going to change the label in this report, or technically, I guess it was a form. But what she didn't realize is she went into the outline and made this change to a member name. And when that happens, that member name happened to have a conflict with an alias somewhere else in the outline. So this was kind of a layered oopsie in this particular use case. But what seemed as something super simple ended up creating a lot of downstream havoc. And they did end up losing data because when they went to refresh the database, there was an error and said, hey, you have duplicate member names. And instead of like full stop right there, let's resolve this first, they kept making changes. And so what ended up happening is these member names that were changed that had the naming conflicts with other aliases within the outline, it deleted all the data to those member names, or to those particular members, and it caused quite a bit of issues with the reporting and so forth and so on. And so what we ended up doing to resolve that is they saved their backups off, which we may be talking about that. We probably talk about that later on in the presentation, but it's always recommended to save your backups off. That way they could go back to, okay, what day was it that this change first happened? We had to review the audit log, and we restored from their backup. Now they did lose a little bit of work time from the error, but we were able to recover everything, and then move forward with their application. And they were off to the races after that.
Yeah, thanks. And that, that's one of the areas that the US Analytics Support Services that we can help with is if someone is an administrator, maybe they're a little bit inexperienced administrator and not really understanding the impacts of changing an alias, which seems simple enough, but there could be bad things that happen. And so even if it's just a quick shout out to us to say, hey, I'm about to make this change, because maybe they're an administrator of their system and they say, I want to do this, just wanted to make sure nothing's going to happen. Melinda would have said, oh, wait, yes, before you do that, did you check this, and this, that could potentially cause you problems. And then they wouldn't have had that downtime and just having to recover lost data.
And to hop in on that, Jennifer, just to tag team a little bit, one of the things to be sure to check is if it's a member name that's being changed, is that member name being referenced in any of your calculations and or reports or forms? Because if it is, specifically with the calculations, when the calculation goes to run, if it can't find the member name, it's going to fail and say there's an unknown member and I don't know what to do with this. And I know we've had some clients where we've collaborated with them on when they were about to make some more major changes. We would do a search and see, okay, can we find that particular member in any of the calculations? And if the answer is no, okay, then we're probably pretty good to move on. But with those type changes, we very much recommend take your backup, refresh test with production, put all of your changes in test it out, and then once you're comfortable, move it into production.
Yeah. And actually, we work with one pretty large client that every Friday evening, we have a maintenance window. So we have a maintenance window. So we basically lock everybody out. We, on Thursday nights before the Friday refresh, we refresh, prod to test, make the updates in test, vet them out. We do a pre-pull of Excel to make sure that their data, what is their data? We've loaded the changes, we've refreshed. We pull a post metadata after the refresh is done. We check to make sure no data is missing. And then we know that on Friday, we're good to go. So Friday evening, we lock everybody out and we can just push those changes through. We don't have to worry about any data getting lost or missing just because everything's done through the test environment first. So, and then, so as I mentioned, the maintenance window. Okay. All right. Well, we will move on to regression testing. So this one is Melinda.
Yep, I'm taking this. And it's a good segue after we've talked about all of that testing to begin with. This pertains mostly to the cloud environments because the patches go in more frequently. However, it is relevant for your on-prem systems too. And really, what we're talking about here is testing any critical processes before Oracle pushes your updates into production. So as a reminder, in the cloud products, the test pods get updated the first Friday of every month, and then the production pods get updated the third Friday of every month. So you have about 2 weeks to do testing in between. And what we want to look for really here is, and again, this would apply if you do patch updates to your on-prem systems too. It's just, having that list of what am I gonna check? And what we recommend here is that, you're wanting to look at what you use the most, like integrations and refreshes. If you have like a main calc that runs every single day or maybe every hour, you'd want to test that. Can you submit data? Can you retrieve data? Anything that's used in reports. Do your reports still pull back? Do your forms still pull back? And I would pick, you don't have to don't do every single one of them. Pick one that is the most frequent form or the most frequent report.
Or maybe even the most critical. I just want
yes, yes. And that's a good thing to remember. Like, for example, a use case that I'm thinking of right now is we had a client that they're doing their regression testing. And so for some, I'm going to take a little segue here. For some of our clients, we do this, and for other clients, they do this on their own. And in this particular case, we had a client, they were doing their regression testing, and we get a call and said, hey, you know what? Our reports are not working. And they were getting invalid intersection errors in these reports that work beautifully every other month. Well, Oracle had pushed out a patch, and the reports that this particular client was using, they have migrated all of their financial reporting reports into management reporting reports. So naming is it's a little bit convoluted, but within the application now, there's another report module, and they had migrated all of these reports in there. The update last month came in, and those particular reports are now reading the valid intersections. So what was happening is the intersections they were pulling in those reports were not, they weren't valid because they weren't listed in the list, essentially. So it was throwing an error, and we had to, work through that and figure out, okay, what's going on? How do we resolve this? And the resolution for that actually did end up being to add those higher level parent intersections to the valid intersection listing so that the reports would render.
Yeah. And that was something that they would have tested, or that they would have caught had they done pulling those critical reports.
Yeah. Well, and they did. They caught. So in this case, they caught this issue, if we want to call it an issue. And so they were able to skip their update in production.
That's
so
right.
the update did not go into production. There's a command in EPM Automate that you can skip the patch update within the cloud. Now with on-prem, that's going to be a little bit different because you control when you put the patch testing in. But it's just, it's just good to have like a list of things to test. And, this actually even would not only apply to, I know we need to move on, but I do want to get this in. It doesn't apply just to the patch updates, but if you have any intermediate or like major changes you're about to do to your application, we fully recommend having a list in place of things to test out. Like, make your changes in production. I'm sorry, not in production. Make your changes in test them, and have like a checklist. One example that we have of a really good use case is we have a client that has a custom workforce app, and they had a code change, and we made the code change. Everything looked like it was, working great in test. We migrated to production. About 2 or 3 weeks later, they called and they said, oh, you know what? This particular feature is not working anymore. And so we dug into it and realized, oh no, what we fixed last month actually broke this other thing. And so we went back and we made a use case list for all of the use cases of like, for that particular workforce app. Like, okay, if I add a person, if I terminate a person, if I transfer a person, everything that they may do with regard to the employees, we made the list. So now every time we make any changes to code for that workforce app, we go check off the box. We test each, and I think there's like 20 something use cases that we came up with of how they're going to use that particular application to make sure code changes don't mess something else up inadvertently, because there's a lot of dependencies in the way that their calc scripts are written.
Yeah. That's a great example. So yeah, make sure that things are tested thoroughly. Okay. And I didn't mention, but at the very end of the presentation, we leave about 5 to 10 minutes open for Q&A for anybody that has questions. So if anyone wants to come back to that specific issue, we will have time for that. So I am going to keep rolling on to housekeeping. And so housekeeping, this one kind of came to my brain, which is why we titled our webinar, The Whole Fairy Godmother, is that, hey, let us do some things to help you so that you can, do more fun things or do more value add or get to the beach type things. So in housekeeping, my questions would be, are regular housekeeping activities done? So do you, on a weekly or somewhat frequent basis, do you merge slices of your ASO cube? Do you clear upper level blocks in your BSO cube and calculate, recalculate or aggregate just to keep things running fast? Make sure that you don't have any problems. Do you also refresh your test pod frequently, or do you only do it once a month before the Oracle patch updates? And I guess that just really depends on how much enhancement or development work you might do. But just, there are automate commands that allow you to refresh your test pods. And then I just wanted to highlight that many of these activities, if you saw in one of the Oracle updates recently, that a lot of these can now be scripted. And so you can use EPM Automate, which is a little bit scary if you're not used to it. I know Melinda's really comfortable in EPM Automate, so she's kind of the mad woman of our team that just gets in there and writes those EPM Automate scripts, but and commands. But you can do a lot of the things that are regular housekeeping activities in EPM Automate. So you can merge slices, you can refresh pods, you can even do what is recommended, which is a restart. Maybe you do that on Fridays, or maybe you do that on Sunday mornings when no one's in the system. And so this would be separate than your daily maintenance that happens, is doing a restart. But a lot of these processes or typical housekeeping things can be automated, scripted, and scheduled, and we can help with that in support. All right, so now I want to talk about monitoring. Monitoring is, do you have automated email notifications that would alert of successful loads or successful processes? If you have business rules that run, do you receive an email, or do you have to manually log in and see if there's a green check, or maybe it's successful running of a job, or do you have email alerts set up? And we can help with building those out if you don't have that. Also, do you monitor data management for errors? When you go into data management, are you looking through process details to make sure that everything has a green check? Did all of your data get imported, translated with no missing mappings, and did it get loaded to the target queue? One of the things too that we talked about as we were kind of going through this presentation was, does everybody know how to interpret the error codes? When things get loaded through process details, there's the error log that gets generated for each process ID. And so when we're helping clients trying to troubleshoot a data load issue, or usually it's a mapping, sometimes it's an import problem, but it might be a mapping issue or data is not getting sent to the target cube. We open up those logs, and that sometimes those are a little bit scary. One of my suggestions is, what is kind of how I always start, is look for the word error, and then I kind of can scan through, because sometimes those may be 20,000 records in the error log. And so you've got to kind of go through and come through fast, right, to figure out why did data not get loaded. Or if I'm looking at the job console in EPM Cloud, I may open up jobs and see that there's something where maybe a refresh failed. And that's where what Melinda alluded to earlier is where you might get a message about duplicates. I think it's duplicate alias sometimes is a little bit scary message, and then trying to troubleshoot where those are. Now, I will just throw something in there. In Oracle's documentation, I think over the years it's gotten really good. So some of this stuff you can help troubleshoot, it's kind of a self-service. You can help yourself to figure out what's going on. But in the case that you need a little help interpreting what those error codes mean, or how to resolve those and keep moving to get your data loaded, we can obviously help clients out with that. Okay, that's really what I wanted to talk about, the monitoring. All right, so I'm going to move on to user security.
Oh, and I'm taking this one. So this one, I think, is something that we really need to be paying attention to. Oh, Jennifer, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead and you haven't even gotten to our notes.
There you go. Thank you.
I'm just like moving right along.
Thanks for the reminder.
Security is one of these things that it's really important. And you have user, are you using single sign-on? And that's kind of one line of defense. Another line of defense is, are you frequently, or like on some sort of schedule, like looking at your user list, because we have turnover. Everybody's got turnover. And do we have the, correct individuals trained as admins to do this? And then also, like when we're looking at those the user list, this is one of the things that a lot of times I'll run across on accident when I'm using or adding a user for a client, is I'll look and see like, wow, these guys have like 5 admins. Like everybody on in their application, or everybody that has access to their application, is an admin. And so I would send a report to the client and say, hey, we recommend you reduce this list. So, because you don't want everybody having admin access, it's too risky. Somebody could accidentally, delete a member, or they could do something that they really didn't mean to do, but because they have the power to do it, it can cause, it can cause some problems. Something else is to frequently look at your listings. I've noticed in some clients where they've had an employee that's been terminated, but the user is still in there. And this is really pertinent to the cloud environments, because if you do not have single sign-on turned on or multi-factor authentication turned on, where you're having to authenticate through a like a like Active Directory or Okta or Azure or something, and it's not controlled by the master list, so to speak, of the employees, and they're like native logins, that user can log in indefinitely because you can access the cloud environments from anywhere. And so that's a big security risk. I would say, especially if you have native logins, to really keep on top of when someone leaves, go delete them. Or if, let's say, you're using companies such as US Analytics for either support or projects, once the project is over, unless that contractor is still actively working with you guys, delete them. Because I've gone into systems before and seen, here's this contractor from this company or that company. Whoever was maintaining the security just wasn't keeping up the listing. And so I would send the list to the client and say, hey, I see that this person and this person are still listed as users. Is that correct? And, based on whatever the answer is, then we'll clean that list up.
So Mel, a couple of comments too
Yeah.
this time. So back to change control, a lot of companies I've been involved with, they have external auditors that have standard procedures to, review how companies, follow their own policies. Some companies require tickets to add and remove users. And auditors always will want to see who has privileged access and who does what changes. So it's good to know how to review the user list regularly, and it's really required for the auditors at least once a year is what I've seen. So it's sometimes it's seems like overkill, but it's pretty important. And it dovetails into monitoring and change control it's always fun to have an auditor say, I need to see these 3 tickets where you added these 2 and remove this one. And then you go, what? So
Yeah.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Yeah. And something else to think about as well, or to consider, is if you have, say, automated processes that are set up, or processes that are going to be frequent, maybe daily or nightly, and they're set up on either using the jobs within the application, or maybe Windows Task Scheduler using some sort of automation tool, to have a service account. And that service account may be only 2 people in IT, but there has to be a little bit of continuity, have the user or the password to that, and, obviously encrypt it in your automations. But that way, let's say there is turnover, at least your processes keep going.
Yes.
Instead of, like, let's say it's under my name, and either, like, one, I change my password randomly, or I leave the company, or, whatever the case may be, and there's an automated process set up with my account. If it, quote, breaks for whatever reason, or I'm removed from the system, that process breaks. Or if the password is updated or expired, that process breaks. So that's something where those type processes are good to have a service account, so that there's continuity, and with processes within the application itself.
Yeah.
Throughout
Now I will
turnover.
say the service accounts are required to also change their password, whether it's 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever. So even that's a good idea to use the service account and password. But that service account, just as a reminder to everybody, that password will have to be changed, and that's something that you may see in your error logs when you get back to monitoring of, oh, something's not loading anymore. That's one of the first things that we check too, is, oh, did the service account password expire? And so maybe you just want to set a calendar reminder to make sure that you get that password updated. So, all right, I am going to move on to the next topic, is new user onboarding and training. And Melinda is going to cover this one, and I'll advance the slide.
Yeah, this kind of goes hand in hand with even a little bit of the security. So you have a new user, you add them, then what? sometimes you have green users. They've never used EPM before. So do you have a quick start SmartView like EPM user guide that's tailored specific to your environment? Oracle has great documentation for this, but it's not specific to your environment, and they'll cover all the features. Well, maybe you don't, maybe you don't use task lists, and that's listed in the documentation in Oracle, and you could have a new employee that's like looking at all of it and like, oh, I'm trying to find my task list, but they don't exist in your application. Does someone provide SmartView training? Because as Oracle evolves, they release new features, and I have training sessions with clients quite often where, I might have a client that has used SmartView for 5 or 6 years, and they're good at it. But we go through, I go through certain things and I'm like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. That's so cool. And so, they're kind of learning new things. And especially as Oracle releases new features with the upgrades for SmartView, you may miss it. Or maybe you haven't updated your SmartView in a while and didn't realize there's a feature available that might actually be really useful for your business or your business process. Would the new employee need training on features and functionality within Workspace? Maybe they don't, maybe they came from an on-prem system. You have a new hire and you have a cloud environment, or vice versa. They worked in cloud and have come to you and you're an on-prem environment. The look and feel of that navigation is a little bit different. And so this is something we could actually come alongside you and help you with. Sometimes the training piece is overlooked, and kind of going back to the oopsie that I was talking about earlier with an employee that was changing a label, that kind of comes back to training. They just didn't know what they didn't know. And we can, help bridge that gap. Sometimes it's just hard when onboarding because you've got your own, you have your own job and you have your own things come up, and it's like, okay, hit the ground running, let's go. And they do the best they can. But we could come alongside and help out with that as well. And I don't know if
Yeah.
Dawn or Jennifer have anything to add to that.
But yeah, I think it's different. You can put video. We have clients that put, training videos on SharePoint or, place in the cloud, but it varies, I think, company to company and how to get people up to speed.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. And I mean, no one is going to know your environment quite like you. So if you are a hiring manager or you hire someone for your team, I mean, definitely it's worth, we can't replace that, but we can at least help with the technical and the navigation of the tool itself and provide some color around using SmartView or EPM, and kind of just an overall data flow of, we can explain where data comes from, how it gets there. And of course you're going to know your business better than we would.
And that can also even segue into your regression testing. So if you have a section within kind of your quick start guide for your employees, it's almost like a user guide on, okay, here's how we, like a monthly update forecast process. Here's how we do our process. Like, we're going to update our substitution variables. We're going to run this script. We're going to load these files, and so forth and so on. And that could be something used in the future. If you make major updates, let's go through this whole process and make sure nothing's missed.
Yeah, that's true.
One thought too on SmartView is a lot of Excel is a great tool, but the best Excel model probably has 7 or 8 errors in it that you don't know. But we do a session later this month on reporting. So there's a good, I've seen SmartView issues that are more spreadsheet errors than really a SmartView issue too. But it's just, you got to be careful with all this stuff. That to make it bulletproof is not easy.
It's not easy. Nope. All right. Now we were going to talk about documentation. So a lot of what we talked about throughout this call, or this webinar, has been about making sure things are documented, making sure they're communicated, make sure they're taught or explained to new users or whatnot, or make sure your security process is documented. But so this really is just documentation in general. When you do have processes that are updated, do you keep your documentation up to date to make sure it's evergreen? So if someone comes in behind you, or you win the lottery, or you get an inheritance from somewhere and you leave the company, does someone know how to run the processes? And so is the documentation kept current? We can help with that process. Then we check, do you have an administrator guide? One of the things when we start supporting a new client is that during our onboarding cycle, we will ask, do you have an admin guide that your administrator, or whoever your administrator was, or because we may come in to do administration for the system sometimes, and this is just a little bit of a plug for US Analytics Support Services, that we may provide A to Z support for your environment, meaning we add users, we update metadata, we load data, we create reports, we do everything soup to nuts. Sometimes we are basically the phone a friend, or bat phone, if you will, support team, where the client just reaches out to us when they have problems. But one of the things that we do during onboarding is asking, do you have an administrator guide? If you don't have one, we can help build one for you. Another thing is, do you have a user guide for your processes? Melinda alluded to this earlier in the new user training, but this might just be for, so there's an administrator guide on doing the technical administration, like adding metadata, creating a new form, or things that you might need to do on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis to your system. But then you might have a user guide for processes, like when it's budget time, what are the steps I need to do? It could be that your documentation is built into your task lists into EPM Cloud, but it also, if you don't have task lists, maybe it's, a form on uh, preparing your budget, or maybe doing your close cycle. You might have a user guide on things that you need to perform. So I think, Don, I did not mention this to you, but the user guide for the close cycle and steps that someone might do for some of the clients that we provide FCCS support for, do they use task lists to help their close cycle?
I think that's an opportunity for a lot of companies to get better with. So, because I think Oracle used to call it the close manager and sold it separately, but
Mhm.
now it's included with all FCC apps that it's task list. But to set it up and to use it, I see more of our clients using Excel spreadsheets. To
Okay.
be frank about it.
Yeah.
But the task list now is task manager, whatever Oracle's calling it, is a pretty nice tool. You can keep separate, Excel files linked to it. So
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. So if you don't have that set up, it's something to consider, just to help your users get a better experience out of the solution. So, all right. So as we are marching along, um, now I just wanted to open it up for any questions. So you have three people that support and or administer a lot of applications. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask away.
Able to
Christine?
hear me okay?
Yeah, can hear you.
Okay. We have an HFM on-prem application, and I would be curious what your approach is on, for example, if you're making metadata changes, how do you treat your history? If you have a historical application that's very robust, maybe like 20 years of history, do you go back historically and reconsolidate that data, or do you go on a case-by-case basis, maybe if you made a lot of hierarchy changes?
Ooh, do you want? I'll start answering, but Jennifer, you can chime in. So, Christine, the first thing is at 20 years to consolidate. If you don't lock periods, to bring forward consolidation from level 0 would take some time.
Yep.
One concept is to like archive, like say each 5-year period, and say this is 2010, 2015 app, and then do 4 separate archives like that to keep
Okay.
it. So yeah, because when you and I am not we have a lot of clients that use locking, which in that respect, to unlock is almost don't ever look back. So you move forward with trying to, it's locked for whatever history is. But I've seen different solutions, companies like archiving reports. But I think 20 years is in HFM is a good candidate to try to archive, either 5 or 7 year periods, just for, if you do monthly metadata to bring it all forward. I mean, I spent in companies years ago when a year's consolidation would take 2 years a year or 2 hours a year. You can be up all night just running,
Mhm.
the processes, which, there's ways to just get it better organized so it runs faster for that stuff. I don't know. That's my first thought, but
Yeah, that would be my I would also agree to archive the different sections of yours to different, apps. Um and then if you didn't need to restate anything, and I would think you wouldn't have to go back to the 20-year, the 20th year backward to restate anything. I'm just thinking about if somebody's come to me and said, "Oh, we're going to actually have a restatement. We have to restate last year." Um, One of the challenges of HFM is that if you're trying to run that first period of maybe just the year that you're required to report on, stuff doesn't work until you go back to the beginning of time and start
Yeah.
and reconsolidate. And so yeah, when I would get those questions or requests from leadership of we need to restart, I just was like, oh, please, can we not do that? But yeah, sometimes it's the only way.
we're not
And
in the
that
business of
happens in
restating. Yeah.
that happens in cloud also. So in cloud, it's uh, you have to go back to the beginning of time.
Okay. I feel like maybe some of the we've had some of those conversations. Um, People, it's hard to let go of what you're used to having available to you, and then trying to figure out where to kind of cut that off and make new opening balances.
Right. Yeah, and that's what can be done, as Dawn, as you were talking about, maybe doing let's say you had 20 years of data, is to create 4 different chunks of, 4 different historical cubes, or not cubes, HFM applications.
Yep.
Is that you would, that second, that the first one might be fine, and then the second one, you've got to like figure out how to get the ending balances of one application kind of moved over, at least in the December period, so that it kind of consolidates fine.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's good. All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, we really appreciate your time for giving up an hour of your day. I know time's important for everybody, and we appreciate sharing some information about keeping your environment clean, I guess, if I'm doing the fairy godmother analogy, is keeping everything tidy and working so that you can get to the beach. So, all right. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
And remember your sunscreen.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember the
Thanks, Jennifer.
sunscreen.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.